If you are just joining, I am about to go live here and we have quite a lot of things to cover. It seems like the news is calmed down a little bit because the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed, but there is a lot of things coming up. In fact, the end of November, early December is going to be a very busy time for Congress, and there's a lot to accomplish. So if you're just seeing this, stick around. I'm waiting to make sure that I'm going live, and then we'll get started here. So good evening to you from Austin, Texas. As you all know, my name is Donna, Imam, and I'm running for U.S. Congress right here in Austin, Texas. Check out our race. Go to votefordonna.com. And if you love our campaign, please do donate so we can help knock on doors and get out the vote like we did last time. And, really inform people of what's going on, not just in Texas, but across this country. So with that, what are we going to discuss today? Well, today is Veterans Day, and many people had many tweets, posted photographs of their family members who are veterans, etc. So I want to cover a little bit about veterans today. It is a very important part of today's show, and it's also important to me because I actually ran in a district in 2020 and that has a high population of veterans. In fact, the entire central Texas area, Austin and surrounding areas, has more veterans per square mile than anywhere else in Texas. So that's why veterans issues are a big deal here. We will also talk about the big news. So last Friday, late night, the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed, okay? What's next? Can the Build Back Better pass? What's in there? We also have a government shutdown coming up. We have a debt limit, and we want to end it off with billionaires are still not taxed. So regardless of what you are seeing in the news about billionaires, selling their stock and having to pay taxes on realized gains, we'll set you back to reality that right now, the reality is that people who are billionaires, which is an unfathomable amount of money, are really not paying hardly any taxes at all. So there's a lot to cover. Stick around. And I have a lot of things to talk about with BIF and Build Back Better, specifically what happened and what we can expect next. And of course, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, I host a Twitter space, 9 p.m. Central Time every Monday, and I've been talking to folks about what they want to see, prior to the BIF passing and after the BIF passing. So I'll share some of that feedback with you as well. So with that, let's get started. So today is Veterans Day. We want to say a happy Veterans Day to our veterans. We hope that they're getting everything that they need and that they're taken care of. So this is my tweet from today that on Veterans Day, what I wish for veterans, and that is that every veteran should be able to get the benefits that they were promised, that they have healthcare coverage, right? Regardless of their status, that's physical and mental health care, without having to wait all day at the Veterans Affairs clinics and hospitals, etc. As you know, I am a huge advocate and believe that we should have healthcare coverage for every single person. Now, I want to share one piece of information with you that you may not be aware of. Not all veterans get healthcare coverage. Some veterans get full coverage if they retired from the military. They get a pretty good health coverage plan in the Central Texas area. That's called TRICARE, for example. It is like having private health insurance, and they are able to get pretty decent health care. Other veterans who did not, retire from the military have the ability to go to the VA, and many of them have to fight for a lot of their healthcare coverage, and it is a tragic situation. In fact, in many cases, when I ran for Congress last time, I spoke to many veterans groups, specifically in the Killeen, Texas area, and what we found is in order for them to be able to get any kind of coverage or get their benefits, they had to engage with these advocacy groups that would help them do their applications, etc. And it was a very long and arduous process for them. So the other thing that I've noticed, I've heard about from veterans, is that often if they are getting disability pay or retirement pay, they are limited from taking on other work. In fact, if they do take on other work and they exceed a certain amount of income annually, then they start to lose some of their retirement pay or their benefits. So that is an area where they're limited. Somehow, if you were doing a business and you were making unlimited amount of money, that's not a problem. But if you are getting your earned benefits and you make some more income on top of that, there are various restrictions around how much income you make to be able to get those benefits. Again, we're talking about means testing, something that Senator Manchin is a big fan of, and I am obviously not. And last but not the least, of course, on the job training, because a lot of times veterans come back and in order for them to go to school full time, it is difficult to be able to raise their families, etc. And so that is, of course, a huge advantage to be able to have on the job training. Now, I want to share with you what the White House is talking about, because I think this is an important part about how the Build Back Better Act will deliver critical investments in American veterans and their families. I thought this was very interesting because they're talking about Build Back Better and not necessarily what's already passed. So there are things inside the Build Back Better that actually impact veterans and their families. One of the things that I want to, and you can go and read this is on the White House website, but I want to bring your attention to one of the items in here that really caught my eye, which is not all veterans are enrolled in or receive health care from VA. Remember, I just pointed that out to you. And many veteran family members may lack access to affordable health care. What do you know? In fact, about 525,000 veterans are uninsured. Across the country, more than 4 million people are locked out of coverage because their state refused to expand Medicaid. One of those states would be Texas. President Biden's plan closes the Medicaid coverage gap while also lowering healthcare costs for those buying coverage through the Affordable Care Act by extending the American Rescue Plan's lower premiums. So the two key things that I want to point out here is, number one, that 525 veterans are uninsured right now as we speak. This is an important fact because this is what I'm talking about, having healthcare coverage. Imagine you signed up for the military, you did your tour, you fulfilled your duties, and you still do not have healthcare. This is the country that we live in today. Now, that account also spoke about ACA benefits. Remember, the Affordable Care Act gives you health insurance, not health care. If you want to get health care, you have to be able to pay the premiums. Even if you get a subsidy, you have to be able to afford the monthly premiums. Number two, you have to be able to afford your deductible and copays to be able to get health care. So you can be a veteran. You cannot have health insurance. You can try to sign up for ACA. You can even get the subsidies that Build Back Better would help you pay your monthly premiums. That doesn't necessarily mean that you would have health care. And that is the most important part of what we need to understand that's happening in our country, is that we actually do not have healthcare coverage for every single person. Now, when I tweeted this today, somebody said, why are we only talking about veterans? Today is Veterans Day, so we recognize them for their sacrifice. If it were up to me, we wouldn't have any veterans. We wouldn't go to war, because we should be using what's called our very strong economic leverage. That is economic incentives, not, the stick, but the carrot. I'm talking about the economic carrots to be able to settle world affairs and challenges among other countries. We should not be sending our kids to war, and we definitely should not be depriving them of health care. Now, with that, I would like to play a little bit from today's PBS NewsHour. Now, PBS NewsHour has a lot of things, a lot of coverage in it, but I thought this is something interesting for you to listen to about what is going on with veterans. And if this is happening to our veterans, imagine, how other people in this country who also don't have health care are faring. So let's play this and we'll watch it together.
service members served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Persian Gulf all the way back to the early 90s and the Gulf War. And many of them were exposed to toxic air, including by burn pits, literally pits where the military would burn everything from tires to styrofoam right next to where service members lived and worked. And veterans groups argued that that created toxic smoke that afflicted service members with higher than average rates of illnesses from asthma to cancer. And for President Biden, this is personal. He believes that his son Bo's brain cancer after service in Iraq may have been caused by a burn pit. But of the 40,000 service members who applied for disability compensation or medical care since 9/11 for cancer, 60% were rejected. The VA says there's no scientific proof that those illnesses were created by toxic exposure during service. And to determine that link, VA relies on data from the National Academy of Science.
So there you go. They are talking here about veterans who have cancer, asthma, and everything in between that are being denied healthcare coverage because they cannot prove that it is directly linked to these burn pits that is causing their health challenges. And notice he talked about there are 40,000 veterans that have applied for coverage specifically for cancer, of which 60% of them have been rejected. So this is something that should be of huge concern to our entire country, that we are signing up our kids in the military. They're being put in harm's way, and because they are unable to find an exact, specific, direct link to the health challenges that they're having, we are denying them health care. So that's where we are on Veterans Day, and this is why I am tweeting about veterans, and that the most important part is that they should get the benefits that they were promised. That is obviously not happening. It's very clear from this report what is happening. So with that, the BIF has passed, so what is next? I want to talk a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure bill and what happened last Friday. So late last Friday, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed. It was known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, but the actual name of the bill is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So it was passed in the Senate, remember earlier, with a vote of 69-30. So there were several, almost 20 GOP senators that voted for the Bipartisan Investment and Jobs Act. Now, just to jog your memory, this bill was put together by a group of GOP senators, and the two leading senators that helped put this together were Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. And their reputations were very much on the line if they could not get this passed through the House, because they had put their reputation on the line for this. They had created this. They were very proud of it, and they wanted to campaign on it. And remember, several weeks ago, I brought up how Center Forward, a dark money group, was already sending out mailers in Arizona, basically congratulating Senator Sinema on getting the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Jobs Act passed, even though it hadn't passed at the time. It had just passed in the Senate, but those were already out. That just shows you the confidence of the corporate lobby in knowing that they will be able to pass this bill. So I wanted to point that out for you. Now, it passed in the House with a bipartisan vote of 228 to 206. 13 GOP House members supported it, so they voted for it, which means it could have passed without all of the Democrat votes, because you need only 218 votes to pass this bill, and 6 Democrats voted against it. It's a $1.2 trillion bill. It includes $550 billion in new spending. The rest of the money came from the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which was passed earlier in the year, which is called it was called the coronavirus bill, etc. But it was passed early in the year. Majority of that money went to the states, a big portion of it, and the unused portion of it is now being reused in this infrastructure bill, roads, bridges, railway, etc. So that is the status of where we are on this bill. Before I get into the details of the leverage and what happened here, I do want to go back and show you what the White House's statement on this was. So this bill has not been signed into law yet. So yesterday, November 10th, the White House's position is that the president will host a bipartisan bill signing ceremony for the infrastructure deal, and also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So this is going to happen Monday, which is also November 15th. Now, keep that date in mind because November 15th is a big, big day for the Build Back Better. Nevertheless, here we go. What is the White House saying about it? They're saying that it will deliver for American families millions of good paying union jobs for working people. We definitely hope so. Improvements in our ports, transportation systems that strengthen supply chains. So this was a big deal. That's why they're putting focus on that. High-speed internet for every American. Well, I certainly hope so because we have put lots of money into internet providers in this country and we have not seen this. And this became specifically apparent during the pandemic when kids started doing school from home and they did not have high-speed internet for every American. In fact, right here in Austin, Texas, about an hour and hour half away from downtown Austin, we had rural areas that did not have high-speed internet and we needed to send school buses rigged out with high-speed internet Wi-Fi so that kids could do their homework or actually even just be able to go to do school. So I imagine how those kids did their homework in the first place. Clean water for all children and families. There's no doubt about it that it's devastating to read that somebody may not have clean water for their children. It's definitely difficult to read that. And investments in our roads and bridges, etc., mass transit, etc., etc. So there's a lot in here, and you can go read this on your own if you want to. But the important part is BIF has passed. Now, let's talk about what happened, right? So originally, let's see what I have next. Okay. I should talk a little bit about that. Because the BIF has passed and because it was passed in a bipartisan way, which is something, by the way, Democrats long for. You know, many Democratic voters, especially general voters, will say, I really want that America back where we can all work together. Well, you have this bipartisan bill. And guess what? Senator McConnell is going around saying that, look, he may not attend the signing of the bill, but it is a Senate product that is good for the country. Now, I want you to keep that in mind. The key word here is Senate product. Notice the House is getting absolutely no credit for putting together this bill. Now, this is very indicative of what's going to happen on the GOP side. The GOP members are going to take a lot of credit for this, and they're going to run on this in 2022 in a big, big way. And they're going to say, we're the ones who made it happen because you didn't have the votes in the House to pass the BIF. We had to offer up 13 votes in the House in order to pass this, and they will run on it as a great thing. Now, don't get me wrong, the bipartisan infrastructure bill will, hopefully put a lot of money. We're talking about, over $1 trillion into infrastructure, and hopefully that will create good high wage jobs, and it will create, hopefully a good living for many families out there. So some people will see that. But let's talk about what happened. So to jog your memory, let's go to the Build Back Better government shutdown and debt limit, right? So I want to talk about what happened leading up to this. Before I talk about that, I want to talk about a couple of things of the dates. Remember I told you, remember the November 15th date. So November 15th date is the date that the Democrats in the House negotiated among themselves to be able to vote on Build Back Better. It was originally supposed to be voted on along with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. They were supposed to go together through the House and be passed together, and then go to the Senate and be passed. The Build Back Better was supposed to be passed in the Senate, and then they would become law. Now, on December 3rd, government shutdown looms all over again because we did a very limited funding of the government. We also have a debt limit ceiling expiration on December 3rd. And November 15th is Monday. So do we believe that the Build Back Better bill will pass on Monday? And what about the leverage? Is it gone? Do we have it? But before we get to that, I would like to remind you what was in there to begin with. The things that the most Americans were extremely interested in was universal pre-K, that's coverage for 3 and 4 year olds. We had the child tax credit expansion, so they would expire at the end of 2021 and they would be extended hopefully for years on end. Medicare expansion, there's two parts to this. One is lowering the age of Medicare to age 60 instead of 65. The second part of it is basically adding dental, vision, and hearing to Medicare and to cover those services for seniors. Specifically for seniors on fixed income, this is a huge challenge for them. They do not have that coverage today and they really struggle from it in a big way. Lowering prescription drug prices, and that is allowing Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices in Medicare. Climate mitigation, paid leave, 12 weeks was the original amount. And of course, tuition-free community college, which is my absolute favorite part of this entire bill, which would be very useful for middle-class families and would be the biggest return on investment on any of these things that we can possibly think of. Then it was pared down, and this framework that was agreed on had these 4 things in it. These were the 4 big key things. And so what did that mean for the original bill? It started at 3.5 trillion and it is now at 1.7. And here's the change, just to jog your memory. Universal pre-K would be limited for either 3 or 6 years, and then it would run out. And the idea here is that at the end of 3 or 6 years, people would love this so much they would be able to expand it. It wouldn't go away. That's the idea behind it. Child tax credits would expire at the end of 2022, so they'd be extended for a year. Medicare expansion would only have hearing coverage, so no dental and no vision. And then lowering prescription drug prices would be limited to 10 drugs. That is not a joke, 10 drugs. And there would be some caps on out-of-pocket expenses. The number that was floated around was $2,000. Right now, there is a percentage that you would have to pay up till $6,500. So it's very expensive for seniors on fixed income. Climate mitigation stayed in. Paid leave was pared down to nothing and then back to 4 weeks. And tuition-free community college was thrown out along with immigration for DACA recipients, TPS, etc. The parliamentarian said no. So that's kind of where we are. Now, November 15th is the day that the House Democrats negotiated amongst themselves in order to vote on the Build Back Better. Will it happen? So one of the points that was brought up is that they would like to have a CBO score. However, the CBO score, I want to actually bring this up here. CBO says that the social spending bill, and they're talking about the Build Back Better bill, a score will take longer and potential blow to Democrats' timing. I will show you this whole article. But the important part here is that the actual agreement was not made around the CBO score. It was specific parts from the CBO report that was important to some of the quote unquote moderate Democrats, some call them conservative, versus the progressives, right? And remember, this whole time they talked about progressives having something like 40 votes. 40 of them were not going to vote on the BIF if they did not get BBB passed in the Senate first because they believed that they would lose their leverage. Okay, now they're saying that may be delayed. One of the things, this was tweeted out earlier today, a nonpartisan tax policy center analyzes House Dems Build Back Better plan finds an average of $6,000 tax cut for those earning between $500,000 and $1 million per year. This is due to SALT. So the SALT tax is a tax a cap of $10,000, which applies to people living in really expensive homes. and impacts a lot of people in states on the East Coast specifically, but also possibly in the West Coast, and of course in Austin, Texas, or in Texas if you live in a really big, expensive home. It basically caps the amount of taxes that you can write off on your federal taxes. So they're saying that if you do this analysis right now with what's in there, basically you're giving a tax cut to quite wealthy people. So he's pointing that fact out right there. The second part I want to talk about before I go into the whole leverage conversation, and you're going to enjoy this. This is a tweet that came out earlier today, and they're saying that Senator Manchin is also against the tax credit for union-made EVs. Again, and this is important, this underscores the wholesale overhaul that the BBB will go through in the Senate. So what he's saying here is that now that the BIF has passed, the Senate can take the Build Back Better, which was put together primarily in the House, the framework was created in the House, agreed to by the White House, etc. The Senate can change all of that because you just need one senator to say no, and that bill can be completely blocked. So the leverage, if you think about it logically, lies pretty much in the Senate's hand to be able to block. Because you have such slim margins, really the leverage is only to block bills, not to pass bills. In order to pass bills, you would need the entire Democratic caucus to vote on it, because you need 218 votes to pass anything in the House, and you need every single senator in the Senate to be able to pass anything. So we talked about this leverage, and if you notice over the past 6 weeks, as I have been talking to you at 7 p.m. on Thursdays, I mentioned over and over again that this leverage is not owned and not held by a handful of Democrats or progressive Democrats in the House. I made that point over and over again. The leverage is in the Progressive Caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, or also known as CPC. It is the 40 plus people that could have held up BIF in order to get the things that they want in Build Back Better. Now, let's look at this in a logical standpoint. You either had leverage or you didn't. You can't have it both ways, right? So if you had leverage prior, then the logical stance is you've given up that leverage because you were holding that leverage and not passing BIF. So if you believe that Democrats in the House, progressive Democrats in the House, actually had leverage over what is the content of Build Back Better, not the amount, not the slimmed down or the beefed up version, but the content. If you had the leverage, that's what that would signify, that you have given up the leverage. Or the other alternative is you never had the leverage to begin with, which begs the question, why delay the bipartisan infrastructure bill for so many weeks and months if you never had the leverage? Okay? If you had the leverage, why give it up not to be able to get what you want in Build Back Better? Now, of course, I leave that up to you, my viewers, to figure out what you think, whether they had the leverage or they never had the leverage, because you can't have it both ways. If they had the leverage, that leverage is now gone based on all of the data that we've seen and all of what has happened and the BIF has passed. What really happened is this. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act was put together in the Senate, and the House Democrats really had no say over what was in there. They didn't get to negotiate the content of that. They didn't get to mark it up. They didn't get to dictate what's on there. So if there are bad things in the infrastructure bill, and it's not all great, there are good things in there, but there are lots of things in there that are not perfect. They're far from perfect. The House Democrats, if they did have leverage, they could have used it to make the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act better. That's number one. Number two, if House Democrats did have leverage to make the content of Build Back Better more focused on American families, especially the bottom 50% of our country, to keep things in like pathway to citizenship for DACA and TPS, to get tuition-free community college, to have child tax credit for the, future. unlimited future of our kids. Those are the things that they could have used that leverage. So the question is, did they really have that leverage, or did they not? Now, to end all of this, I'm going to take you back to this article so that you can take a look at it right here, rather. It says, the CBO says the social spending bill score will take longer, etc., etc. Let's look down here in the actual article. The first part of the article is about the CBO director saying that they will need more time and certain estimates will be released, but it looks like there's a lot more work to be done. As you scroll down, you'll see here, you scroll down here to the House Budget Chairman, John Yarmuth, a Democrat from Kentucky, said that he expected a CBO score to take about 10 to 14 days and wouldn't be done until the week before Thanksgiving. So something it could slip until the week of Thanksgiving through preliminary estimates done earlier. Now, the progressive Democrats are saying the score is not the holdup. It was specific information in the CBO, from the CBO, that the moderate, quote unquote, moderates needed. And in the end, I want to end with this, which says from Speaker Pelosi, that is our plan to pass the bill the week of November 15th, and we're very proud of that. So the question is, will they vote on Build Back Better? Will it be $1.75 trillion? Will it actually have anything that's truly useful? And the content matters, because if the American people do not feel the impact of voting in Democrats across the House and the Senate and the White House, it may disenfranchise some voters if they don't see an impact from it in their day-to-day life. And when I talk about day-to-day life, I'm talking about healthcare, education, cost of living, and really being able to deal with things like student loan debt, which is coming due earlier in the year. Right now it's paused. So people will be looking at their economic position and how the economics of day-to-day has changed for them over this pandemic and over the last 2 years. And specifically in 2021, has their life improved for the better? And that's what they will be focused on. It is true that the infrastructure bill may create some jobs and be very, very useful. We don't know when that exactly will kick in. Will it impact people like single moms trying to raise children, single dads trying to raise children, parents that are looking for universal childcare? They're looking for universal pre-K to be able to go back to work. Those are specific things that impact people's day-to-day lives. That's what people are going to be watching for. So unless the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act really impacts working families in a positive way, economically, they may very well be, disenfranchised from wanting to come out and support the people that they put in office in 2020. So that's something to really think about as we move forward. Now, all of this week, we heard about one billionaire selling off some stock. Not a whole lot, to be frank, something close to $5 billion, which is not much. The real fact here is that billionaires are still not taxed. Let's look at this. So there was this article that went around for quite a while, for the last 48 hours, about billionaires selling more than 3.5 million shares worth over 3.88 billion trades carried out Tuesday and Wednesday. So today's Thursday, so the last 2 days. And the fact is that this was spurred by things that were set in motion back in September 14th of this year, that this person needed to be able to sell the stock. It was part of the requirement of how it was set up. Now, could they have gotten around that in some other way by taking loans, etc.? It's very possible. Yeah, it is possible. However, this is not a requirement, or this is not being done to be able to pay taxes. I want to remind everybody who's watching this that this selling of stock and the taxes that will be paid on realized gains was not in a fashion to pay taxes that billionaires are required to pay. In fact, the billionaire tax came up earlier in the Build Back Better. In fact, one of the senators that was supposedly for it, and again, this was reported, is Senator Sinema was supportive of a billionaire tax, but apparently that this was really not taken seriously by Democrats at any time at all, to be frank. So this is what is happening in our country, that a lot of people were quite excited about a billionaire selling his shares, but the fact is that we still do not require billionaires to pay any taxes. And I want to end with two things. One is most billionaires are taking loans against their taxes, and they're paying very little money to actually even take that loan. The interest that they are paying on that loan are tiny. They're able to pass on all of their gains untaxed to their heirs, as long as they continue to take loans to be able to fund their lifestyle. So that's exactly how the ultra wealthy are living their lives. We don't have a billionaire tax, and I went into quite a explanation of what that could mean. One is having that kind of ability to do things can impact our economy. It could technically impact the economy of a small city, for example, or even a mid or a large city, for example. They have enormous amount of power over what is happening across our country when you have that kind of monetary power to be able to drive decisions in the economy. The economy can be changed and manipulated in a way that doesn't work for working families, and that is why the billionaire tax is very important. To make a case, I want to end with a very short video about the opportunity zones that were created as part of the tax giveaway for the ultra-rich under President Trump. And so I'm going to play you a couple of seconds of this, and you will see exactly how the ultra-wealthy benefit from not being taxed at all, just to make a case right here. So this is also part of today's PBS. I highly encourage you to go watch this if you can. There's some really, really interesting things here, but let's play this.
A seeming godsend was part of President Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, opportunity zones.
I thought, God, you've opened up the windows of heaven.
So what are opportunity zones? Supposedly low-income census tracts chosen by states that you get a capital gains tax break to invest in.
First, you have to have a capital gain.
David Wessel has written a whole book about opportunity zones, or OZs. Only the rich can play, since only if you're rich do you have an asset worth enough to invest with or pay taxes on if you sell it. But, says Wessel,
You sell that asset and you get to defer capital gains taxes on that initial sale and get a discount on the capital gains tax. Then you take those profits and put them into an opportunity zone fund, hold that for 10 years, and you don't have to pay any capital gains whatsoever.
so the proverbial
So there you go. You heard it directly from how this works for wealthy people. That first you have to have gains, and if you follow the rules and hold it for a certain amount of time, you don't ever have to be taxed ever at all. These are the loopholes that are being written in our bills. Even though we are putting in and voting in our Congress members are either not paying attention or have no control over what is actually in the content of this bill. Now, many of you I know will say, well, that bill was passed under President Trump, and that's true. And whether we voted in Republicans or Democrats or didn't have a choice, it is important to point out that GOP members of Congress, the House and the Senate, have a responsibility towards the American people. And giving tax giveaways to the ultra wealthy, people who are not paying their taxes and over again are able to make income, keep income, grow income in a way where they do not have to pay taxes, while working Americans who get up every single morning and go to work for hourly wages, sometimes in this country as low as $7.25, and lower if you're a server, $2.15 per hour plus tips. Those are the working people that are paying the bulk of the taxes in our country. And that includes people who work for a living. We're talking about engineers, doctors, lawyers, people with high wage jobs that make six-figure salaries are also paying taxes on every single dollar of their income. But people who have capital are investing it and rolling it over and over again without paying any taxes. And that's what's being written into these bills. These people are also the donor class. They have an enormous amount of influence over our politicians, over Congress members, whether they are GOP Congress members or whether they are Democratic Congress members in many cases. These corporations, hire hundreds and hundreds, in some cases over, thousands of lobbyists across various industries that have the ear of our GOP and our Democratic Congress people. We need people in Congress that are watching that bill, that understand the nitty-gritty of how these bills are being put together, and not only listening to lobbyists that are obviously going to curry favor for the corporations that they represent and that their salaries are paid by. That's what I wanted to point out to you, is that we just passed a bipartisan infrastructure act, which has lots of things in there that are good for the American people and hopefully will be good. But there are also many things in there that are giveaways to the ultra wealthy. And they're huge giveaways to corporations. And it is important for our Congress people to know the content and be able to negotiate the content of the bill. Remember, this entire presentation today has been about the content of the bill. We have to understand what is in Build Back Better and how do we get the items on this list that really impact American families. So with that, I wanted to, thank you for watching today. I really, really appreciate those of you who tuned in live. And of course, if you're watching this later, I hope you enjoy the angle that I bring to this presentation. And of course, we'll see if the Build Back Better passes and how slimmed down it is. But for the sake of working families, I hope that the people that we have in Congress today, whether they are GOP members or Democrats, really take into consideration the fact that they have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to the American people, specifically the bottom 50% of our country. Because if we do not do things for them, eventually our country will not be able to keep the lead that it has economically. And that is a very important part of what we do and the progress that we bring. So with that, I want to thank